Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young, licensed clinical social worker. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, thank you so much for joining me. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Justine Froelker. We talked about vulnerability and shame and courage. It's an amazing talk. I really feel blessed to have her on. I'm really reluctant to say too much because her bio says it all. So I'm just going to read you her bio right now. Full of grit and grace, Justine Froelker uses her fiery passion, the occasional curse word, and her witty humor to share her vulnerability and truth to light up the world. Justine is an advocate for speaking about shame and learning to thrive when life doesn't turn out how you hoped, dreamed, or even planned. Justine is a licensed professional counselor, a certified Dare to Lead Facilitator based on the research of Dr. Brene Brown, with over 19 years of mental health experience, speaker, and author. She is the author of best-selling books Ever Upward, The Mother of Second Chances, Taking Flight, and her newly released book, Complicated Gray. And she recently gave 2 TED Talks. Justine currently lives in St. Louis with her husband Chad and their 3 dogs. She enjoys her child-full life by spending time with friends and family, practicing creative self-care, laughing many times at herself, and building butterfly gardens on her acre of land, which has made her an accidental butterfly farmer. I've been following Justine on social media, and she really models vulnerability and courage and just showing up as you are, sharing honestly about what's going on. I'm not going to say too much because you'll be able to hear all about it in this talk. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with others and please rate and review. In the show notes, I have links and instructions to show how you can rate it in Apple iTunes. It really helps. All right. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Justine, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on with us.
Thank you for having me. I love conversations about all of this stuff, so I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
All right. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
I think I'm probably very close. And at the same time, it's so funny. I had somebody ask me about highly sensitive and then also my Enneagram. And I was like, then we do another personality test at church. And I was like, I really struggle with anything like that because of all the personal work I've done and how different I am. Like whenever we have all those personality tests, even as a therapist, they're like, answer these questions as if you were a child. I was like, that was so long ago. 1, I don't have one of those memories that remembers everything about my childhood. And 2, I've done so much work. And so I'm definitely borderline, I think, for highly sensitive. I have a lot of highly sensitive people in my life, though. A lot of people that I love very, very much identify that way.
Mm-hmm. And I know I had asked if you were willing to take the test ahead of time if you didn't know. And then you sent me a number back. I'm like, what is that?
I know, because it was so low, right? That's why I was like, I don't know. And I was like, is that right? I don't know if that's right.
Well,
my husband would probably say I am.
Well, what I see that you have is the depth of processing. You really think and feel things very deeply in the way that I see you expressing yourself. You really have that depth of processing, and then the emotional vocabulary and the emotional language and the expressiveness. The point of this podcast is not like, you passed, come in the door, sorry, get out the door. It's really to provide education, but I see those as being really primary strengths that you have. And so that was really why I wanted to have you on the podcast.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I have that for sure.
I think what I want to do is just jump right into what we're going to talk about today. So we had talked about shame and vulnerability, and this is really what your life work is about.
It really is. So I have been a licensed professional counselor for years. I've been in mental health now for over 19 years. I started in the field very young in working with clients who struggle with substance abuse. And then when I came to St. Louis for graduate school, I kind of fell into the world of working with clients who struggle with eating disorders. And then I moved into more of anxiety, depression, perfectionism, especially in my private practice. We went through an infertility journey, at which point I found the work of Brene Brown. It'll be 5 years that I went and trained with Brene. And so I am a certified Daring Way facilitator. Now I am a certified Dare to Lead. With the new book, we have a new certification. And so I applied for that certification, just kind of how my career has changed in this last year. I'm no longer working with individual clients, and I'm working more on like retreats and workshops and videos and speaking engagements and books, because I have this, what I call a really big story. I used to call it a hard story. But through the work that I have done through Brene's research and using it in my storytelling skills and my story, I have a true gift to teach this work, especially around shame and vulnerability and resilience and courage, in a way that people can understand it. And most importantly, in a way that people can actually go beyond watching her TED Talks, go beyond reading the books, and make for real change in their life. Because that's what I'm all about. Like, what makes you do something differently today that's going to change something about your daily life and make it more courageous and happier and more fulfilling. And so that's my true passion. And at the root of all of that is really helping people understand and develop new vocabulary and skills around shame, vulnerability, and resilience and courage.
Can we just break it down and talk just what is the connection between shame, courage, and vulnerability?
Yeah. Let's start first off with shame defined. So I always teach people, this is not the shame that you may think of when your mother or your grandmother had said, you should be so ashamed of yourself. Like, yes, that's a piece of it. That's a nuance of it for sure. But Brene's definition of shame is a deeply painful feeling of being unworthy of love and belonging. Now, how I describe that to people, it is that not enoughness, that we live in this world that will tell us we are not enough every single day. We also probably go to bed without our to-do list finished every single day, in which case we tell ourselves that we're not enough. And then on top of that, we all have these lives that, as amazing as they are, they also have probably been pretty difficult, because we all have trauma, loss, and tragedy in our lives. We all, I call it grief. We all have grief, because none of us have a life that has turned out how we hoped, dreamed, and planned. Not exactly, at least. And so when we have those hard, what I used to call hard stories, those traumas, losses, and tragedies then also tell us that we're not enough. And so that brings us into shame, that not enoughness, that tape that plays in our head of I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm undeserving. Those are what I have found in 5 years of doing this work and teaching this work. Those are kind of like the three foundations that we all have shame stories that center from I'm not enough, I'm unworthy, I'm undeserving, no matter what the situation may be. Now, that comes to vulnerability because most of us didn't grow up in homes where we were encouraged to get curious about our emotions. You know, if we said we were scared, or we never probably would have said, I'm feeling shame, because we didn't have that vocabulary back then for sure. I mean, people still, I can literally see and feel people cringe when I say the word shame still. And I've been saying it for 5 years and teaching it on all of my platforms, and people still get very uncomfortable and log off when I say the word shame. And yet they know that they want to lean into it because we all have it. If you don't have shame, well, there's another diagnosis. You're a sociopath. And so we all have shame. None of us like to talk about it. And the less we talk about it, the more we have of it, or the more it runs our lives. Just like if you're not learning how vulnerability functions in your life, it's going to rule your life. And so that vulnerability is that leaning in, that curiosity of the struggle, of the hard parts of life, the curiosity to actually feel our feelings, to label them in a correct way, to let them move through and pass through versus sitting in them, sitting with them, or feeling them and not hurling them off. And so when I'm not willing to get vulnerable and get curious about my emotions, a lot of the times the things that will rumble up will be shame, because we're not giving ourselves the permission. And when we're not giving ourselves the permission to truly live present in our lives and to stand in our sacred truth, there is almost this inherent place of feeling unworthy of that love and belonging.
Can you give just a very basic example of what shame would look like for somebody that's innocuous? Because I think that we understand these big concepts, but shame happens when we have a bad phone call.
Oh, totally. In the curriculum, the Rising Strong curriculum, we talk about, I have to know when I'm emotionally triggered. That's what Brene calls it. I like to call it angst. Like, we know when we're feeling angsty, and most likely you feel it in your head somehow, like tunnel vision or racing thoughts or no thoughts at all. You also probably feel it in your chest, like a heaviness in your chest, pounding heart, racing heart. And then you also feel it in your belly, a pit in your stomach, heaviness, rumbling belly. What often happens, because we're not taught about vulnerability and shame, is that we feel the angst and then we stuff it down or offload it in some unhealthy coping way. Versus if I were to get curious about that emotion, I would then need to practice some of those healthier coping skills to bring some of that physiological response down, so that I have kind of that wherewithal, that foundation to ask myself the question that we use a lot in this curriculum is, what is the story I'm making up? Because our brain works very hard to make something make sense, whether or not it is correct. So the very, very simple example that we always use when I teach this curriculum, and Brene uses it in the actual curriculum videos. So let's say you're at work, you just leave a meeting, and you walk out at the same time as your boss, and you say, that was a good meeting, and your boss rolls her eyes and huffs. The facts that you have is that she rolls her eyes and that she huffs. Those are the only facts that you have. By the time you make it back to your office, even if it's literally 5 steps down the hall, your brain will do the work to make up a story to fill in the dots. And no matter whether or not that story is correct, we get a chemical reward, an aha. Like actual dopamine endorphins are released when our brain is like, ooh, that makes sense now. That story makes sense, whether or not it's correct. And so where shame comes in is, I knew she never liked me. I knew she never trusted me. And then what happens? You're in shame. The story you're making up is that she never liked you, that she never trusted you, when the only facts we have are that she rolled her eyes and huffed. The way shame works, though, if we're not willing to rumble with it and to move past the story that we're making up, is that in the next 30 minutes, we shoot off 2 crappy emails. We maybe answer the phone to our daughter and yell at her and things like that, because we're in shame. We're in this place of not enough. We're in this place of, someone doesn't like me. I did something wrong. What is wrong with me?
And for highly sensitive people, because one of the traits is that we pick up on subtleties that nobody else does, we are so much more likely to pick up on subtle cues that other people may not even be aware that they're giving up, than we really do make up a story in our head.
Absolutely. And I think that piece too is that reminder, like, I love combining this work with the 4 agreements. Take nothing personally, because I know that that highly sensitive person will take, probably also see the eye roll and the huff, and then maybe also notice the arms crossing or the way their feet are pointing or something like that, when it probably 99% has nothing to do with us.
Right. And highly sensitive people tend to pick up on other people's emotions, whether they're aware of it or not. So now not only do we have the visual cues, but then we also have that overlay of somebody else's emotions. Since you brought up the 4 agreements, why don't you just shoot out what they are, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Oh my gosh. Though I seriously only always remember take nothing personally. Because that one is so huge to me. And I take nothing personally. I mean, I even went so far as that, like, my second TED Talk, I bring in the 4 agreements, take nothing personally, and I combine it with shame about one of my own stories, because I totally personalized a ton of stuff that had nothing to do with me. But that's how quickly shame works. And when we take things so personally, like, we're never going to be able to stand in our sacred truth, right? Like if I am constantly in shame, I'm not leaning into it. I'm not asking myself what the story is I'm making up, and I'm taking everything personally and not reminding myself that literally we are all really wrapped up in our own stuff. Our response to other people is more about us than it is about them. And someone's response to us is more about them than it is about us. I say this in my second TED Talk. This is both a responsibility because I have to own my stuff, but it's also freedom to be who we are.
Yes. Okay. So 2 things. I will look up the 4 agreements and I will.
So bad. I should have those memorized because I love that book, but I just value that one so much.
I gotta make some stuff up, but I'd rather be accurate. So I will put I will put the 4 agreements in the show notes. And then let's go back. So you leave this meeting with your boss. You say it looks like a great meeting. Boss rolls her eyes, huffs. And so now you're in this shame spiral. So then what's the next thing that we do?
So we got 2 roads in front of us. The road of, I'm not willing to get curious about those emotions. So I feel the angst and I'm not willing to get curious about it. So what happens when we don't get curious about it, we will offload it. And what Brene teaches in the curriculum, there's 6 common ways that we offload our hurt, or another word for it that I like to use is like we hurl it because we're not willing to lean into it and get curious about it. So the 6 ways that we hurl or offload our hurt are chandeliering. So we stuff and stuff and stuff, which we are not these endless vats where you can keep stuffing your unprocessed emotional pain. Chandeliers, they stuff and stuff and stuff until they explode. So they rage, they cry, they freak out, even and most especially at the smallest, littlest frustration. So that's the chandelier. Then we have what we call bouncing hurt. So that's anger, blame, and avoidance. So anger, you're just mad all the time. You're pissed off all the time. Like you're mad and you're mad at everyone and everything. Or you avoid. I'm okay. I don't want to talk about it. I'm over it. It's fine. No, I don't want to talk about it. It's good. We're good. I'm good. Or you blame everyone else and take no responsibility. Then you've got the stockpiler. So the stockpiler, they stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff, but rather than offloading it like in a chandelier way, raging, their body keeps score. The body always wins. The body is the wisest part of us. And so they get sick, insomnia, depression, anxiety, stomach pain, which we know that there are definite organic causes to those things. There's also many, many causes are unprocessed emotional pain. So that's the stockpiler. Then, of course, we probably have our number one way that we do it here in America. We are numbers. So you offload that emotional pain by taking the edge off with anything. Fill in your blank. Perfecting, overscheduling, working, eating, sleeping, Netflix binging, sex, drugs, alcohol. Pick your poison. I mean, anything can really be turned into an unhealthy coping skill. So that's the number. Then there's always a Harry Potter reference in all of Brene's books. So this one is called the umbrage. So that umbrage is someone who's not integrated. So their dark is not integrated with their light. And we're all full of strength and weakness. And so that umbrage is that person's that's like, oh my gosh, I love you so much and you're so amazing. I'm going to help you and I will do anything for you. And I hate your guts. Like they are that person that you walk away from them and you're like, she might murder me in my sleep. Like she's going to explode. That's the umbrage. And then the 6th way that we offload hurt is the high-centered. So the high-centered is you've lived this life a little bit. Like you know what it's like to live vulnerably and to rumble with shame. And so you know that it's freeing, you know that it deepens your relationships. And so you don't want to go backwards, but you're scared to death that if you keep going forward, you're going to unleash a torrent of emotion that you cannot stop or turn off. So you choose to stay stuck. And as I have told my clients for years, stuck is a choice. So I see my boss roll her eyes and huff. And if I'm not willing to get curious about that emotion, I'm going to offload that hurt in one of those 6 ways, most likely. The other road that I could take would be to get curious about that emotion. And so when I get curious, I realize that my body is physiologically increased, right? Because that's what happens when we're triggered. First step is to calm down that physiological response, taking deep breaths, paying attention, giving myself permission to feel and to struggle because I need to get my thinking brain back on track. When we are in angst, our emotions are writing our story. And I got to bring my thinking brain back on track, most especially to ask myself that question, what's the story I'm making up? Oh, the story I'm making up is that she never trusted me. Is that true? And then I have to really rumble. When I ask myself, what's the story I'm making up? That's going to give me that space to rumble with what comes up. So in the curriculum, we rumble through different emotions like grief, belonging, trust, boundaries, loss, anxiety, criticism, vulnerability, and shame. What's the story I'm making up? I knew she never liked me. I knew she never trusted me. What's rumbling up for me in there? Well, criticism. Has she criticized me? Is there a lack of sense of belonging at work for me? Am I in shame because I screwed something up and I haven't talked to her about it yet? Because then once I rumble with whatever emotions come up from that story I'm making up, I get to rewrite my story.
Right. Can you talk just about what Brene means when she uses the word rumble in case people haven't heard that before?
Yeah, I have a free ebook on my website. I call it Wrestle, Rumble, and Rise because, man, we got to wrestle with this yuck. But then I've got to rumble with those emotions. And what that just means, it means things like, I've got to check what's true here. What are the real facts? What is my stuff to own? What is not my stuff to own? What is the conspiracy maybe? What is my brain filling in the dots with? What is truth? What's about my past, you know?
So to me, that's about being present with the feelings and, like you said, not using the 6 ways that we can hurl it, but really being present to what's going on. I also often talk about it as like the hot potato. I'm in my 50s, but there used to be a game when I was a kid called Hot Potato. And it was this little red plastic hot potato that you'd wind up and you'd have to toss it from person to person. And you didn't want to be the person holding it when the timer went off. And it's the same thing that when we have feelings that are really intolerable, we often, I call it hot potatoing it. We find a way to get rid of the feeling and give it to somebody else because we don't want to hold it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, a lot of us were not encouraged to get curious about how we were feeling. Teaching this work for 5 years, I can't tell you how many family quips I have. For my family, it was chin up, Justine. Or I've heard like, keep it in the middle, get it done, get over it, buck up, chin up, pick yourself up. Every family probably had their thing, their way of saying, you need to get over this and not feel, basically.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to feel. And the really hard part is that we're feeling. And then we have this brain that makes up stories.
Right. And I find too, and I'd love to hear, because this is just my own anecdotal thing, but it seems like the stronger the emotional response, the stronger the need to make up a story and to justify and rationalize. And my guess is that comes from if we grew up and we're not supported in having our feelings. But I know that when I have a really strong reaction to something, I feel like I have to justify it. And so that need to make a story in my head is really strong.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit with it, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is lifelong work. I guess it does get a little easier the longer you practice it. And bottom line, it is simple. Like, just like all of this work to lead a life that is whole and happy and healthy, no matter who we are, the steps are fairly simple. We really just have to choose to do it. And so I have an alumni page of people who have done a workshop or retreat with me. I have like pinned at the top of the page, I have, 10 ways that you can practice this work daily, because we get back to life and we believe the lie that we don't have time or space to feel. We don't have time or space to rumble. So we're not doing it. What we then find is that we're quickly very empty. We're very short with everyone in our lives. We are not practicing self-love and the acts of self-care at all. And we feel really, really empty. And at the end of the day, when we feel empty and like we have nothing left to give anyone else, it's because we have not given to ourselves. That is tied to shame and worthiness. That is our enoughness.
And I have to say, only because my son has been in the hospital all week long and I'm providing care for my mom. And I can tell you there is very little that I have to give, and it's not always related to shame. And I don't mean to say that in a glib way. I really want to be mindful because I know there are people that are listening that are caregivers or have young children. We've got to find that balance. But there are times when the reality of life is we just don't have enough for ourselves, and hopefully it's just temporary and we can figure out a way to get back on balance.
Yep, for sure. I presented this work to a group of caregivers before. Actually, it was a combined group of caregivers and their loved ones who were going through cancer treatments.
Mm-hmm.
When we are able to have this conversation in an empathic way, how much we realize that we're on the same page. And so what I know is that I've been saying this a lot lately, like, I don't really believe in balance anymore. Because for me, at least, balance is that like undulating between the two extremes. There will be seasons in my life that, yep, I'm more towards one of the extreme, but I want to prioritize and find that harmony. What we know is that you have to fill yourself up. You have to rumble with your own worthiness stuff and take care of you to take care of anybody else. And where that balance piece gets in, or where it becomes unhealthy, I believe, is that people believe the lie that if they're not all the way in and doing a great job at it, and it's not an hour of self-care, they just do nothing. And when I say I need you to pour into yourself, I'm saying it could just literally be one thing that's for 5 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. It could even be while you're peeing and you just read, you watch a good video or you listen to a song. Multitasking. I'm okay with that because yes, there are absolutely seasons in our lives where we have to be taking care of other people or there's just not enough hours in the day. However, if we keep believing the lie that we cannot make even 5 minutes for ourselves, that will never get better.
And I think it's really about seeing that it's this and, because for me, although it's been probably one of the most stressful weeks that I've had in a really long time, I have had so much love and support, and I've had people that have been here for me. And part of that self-care is having people that will listen to my frustration, my angst, my grief, my sorrow, that self-care. And I think that we get this idea of if I'm taking care of myself, I will feel refreshed and replenished and I will be calm and happy.
Yeah.
I'm in survival mode. I'm doing okay and I'm in survival mode and I know I'm more irritable and things get to me much more and I'm able to communicate to the people around me. This is what you can do that helps fill up the bank of mom or the wife of mom. And these are the things that deplete me. And so this is how you can help me out because when I'm a fulfilled mom and wife, we have a little bit of a happier family. So I think it's really important to know that self-care doesn't necessarily mean that you get a blissful, happy life. It just means that you find ways to keep the reserves up so that you can keep doing the hard work that you need to do until at a future time, you kind of get that sense of like, oh, this is like the world is such a happy place.
Absolutely. One of my friends, I'm doing a St. Louis in-person workshop, like once a month. We're going through the curriculum and it's kind of like a rolling enrollment group or whatever. And she also is part of my side gig. And so I asked her, she goes, I'm really struggling with consistency. And she goes, I go, what are your must happens for you every day? And she named off 3 things. And I said, okay. I go, only because one of those things was for you. Cause she said, listening to a book on the way to work. The rest were about her family, her kids, her work, things like that. I said, can you give yourself permission that that is enough right now? Now, if you had named 3 things of things that you were taking care of everybody else, I would have called you out on it. And she goes, I never thought of it like that. I go, give yourself permission that right now for this season is enough. And at the same time, you know, and you hold yourself accountable that it is for this season because listening to a book on your way to work is not going to be quite enough to sustain a working mom of 2 kids.
Right.
Because life's full. And so like, that's not going to be quite enough. But right now, do you need to give yourself permission that is enough?
Where I would love to go from here is I would love to have you share one of your stories because you have so many great stories that just demonstrate your vulnerability and courage so beautifully. And then what I would love to do is to talk about, for those people that feel like I can't talk about what's going on, like this is private, it's, it's not okay. I would really love to be able to provide either some information or an illustration about the shift from when we go from I can't talk about that to this is who I am, I'm okay with it, and the freedom that it brings.
Mm-hmm. For anyone that has followed me on social media, I share very transparently on social media. It is not intimate because the intimate details of my life are reserved for those people who have earned the right to hear my entire story. And when we really think about it, those are very few people in our lives. In fact, in the curriculum, we put them in a 1-inch box. Like, how many names go into that 1-inch box? So intimacy is not the same thing as vulnerability. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. What I have found in these last, it's 6 years. Actually, today or tomorrow was our last transfer. We went through an infertility journey 6 years ago, and we used a surrogate, and we lost 3 babies, and we ended our journey without kids. We have worked very hard to create and fight for and receive ways to parent in other ways because we've never felt called to adoption. What I know is that when I started talking about my truth in a vulnerable, wholehearted way, meaning not to seek approval, not to seek attaboys, not to seek, you're okay to make that decision, rather to just seek this place of healing connection, my life changed. My clients started getting better faster. My relationships deepened because people are able to look at me living my life in a wholehearted, authentic way. Yep, some of them still only watch, in which case they're not in that arena with me. And yet I know more of them are choosing to live their own lives wholehearted and authentic now also. Because what I've learned throughout our recovery after a failed infertility treatment or journey is that one of my biggest messages that I love speaking on is that healing will never, ever take place in disconnection. If we are not showing up and living our lives in an authentic and vulnerable way, there is no connection, which means there would be no healing. This world's too broken for to not have more healing in it. And we all yearn to feel seen and known and loved. Like even yesterday, my 4th book has released, and it's been one heck of a debacle. It's been a very difficult process, and it finally went live again. And so I was like, well, we need to kind of rally and get the ranks up. And so I went live on all social media platforms, which I have a pretty big platform at this point. No makeup, hadn't brushed my teeth. I had my pajama top on over my workout clothes, dirty hair because it was hair wash day. And I love makeup. People also know that I love makeup. If I have lips on, it's because I'm feeling a little bit intimidated or I'm super excited about something that I'm going to share with you. And so people are like logging on and they're like, you're hilarious. I even had one of my best friends, she goes, I cannot believe you just announced that your book was live with no makeup on. I was like, well, I wanted to take a bath. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to wait because I was going to I knew I was going to, for the next hour, pour into myself to be still, to receive. And I believe in this book more than anything I've ever believed in, which also has been a difficult piece of this process to trust what it's supposed to do and not strive and push. But I knew I had to get the word out. I know when I choose to share my life in that way, someone will see themselves in my story. And just maybe that will give them a little bit more of their own courage to stand in their own sacred truth.
Why don't you tell us the name of your book since we're here?
So my first book is called Ever Upward. It came out over 4 years ago. So that is my book I had 2 back surgeries in high school. I spent a year of my life in a body cast. So it tells that story. And then it also goes into, because of that story, that's why we had to seek infertility treatments and try to make the family through gestational surrogacy. So it goes through that story. And then ultimately, when our journey ended because the money was gone and our hearts were broken, and I was in the deepest, darkest hole of my entire life, I really started practicing what I had been teaching to my clients for the last 12 years, truly started practicing it every day because I had to dig my way out. And so that's what Ever Upward's truly about. It's about that reclaiming my life really after it really didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, and and what we paid for even. And then I also have the Mother of Second Chances is my blog. So after our journey ended, I wrote a blog really for 3 years, twice a week. And so I put that blog into a book because I once had a business coach. She was like, if you have a blog that has 100 blog posts, put that into a book and make some money off of it. Especially therapists are not asking for what they're worth in money enough. And so she's like, put that in a book. And I was like, okay. So I put it in a book. I have a coloring journal out there. It was more of a passion project. Like it's a coloring book / journaling prompt book called Taking Flight, based on the journey of the Monarch Butterfly. And then this latest book is called The Complicated Gray. And it is essentially my faith testimony. So it's technically a faith book, and you might be a little shocked by the language in it. And that's also just real life.
Well, and that's what I loved. I saw your live yesterday, and I just love how you model that you show up no matter what's going on, whether you're in your PJs or dirty hair or dressed up, and you tell the truth about what's going on. And I think so much of the healing work is about modeling so that people get a chance to see what it's like to watch somebody. And I think that people that are not at a place where they do a lot of self-disclosure and struggle with vulnerability and shame feel like this is a yucky part of me. And if anybody saw this, I work to hide this. And if you saw this, you would go running, screaming away from me. And what happens is, when I have those opportunities to see you just showing up as you are, I feel so close to you. I can relate. I can relate to those vulnerabilities in you, and those end up becoming tremendous strengths as we shed light on our own darkness and we become okay with it. Then somebody can say, you're so, and we go like, yeah, and? But before we do the work, it feels like if someone were to name that, it would feel so painful and hurtful because it feels like it's this terrible secret about who we are.
Yeah, whereas it's like, it's a secret to our healing and our connection.
Yeah.
It's a secret to that. It's not the secret that needs to be hidden.
And I wanted to circle back. What I heard you say is that you've got people that watch you in your process and have not jumped in. They're not in the arena. And I know that that's Brene's talk about being in the arena and doing the work, especially for highly sensitive people, that we tend to stand on the sidelines and we observe and get as much information as we need to. And when we're ready, we jump in. And so I know that I often will hear something and take it as a shame statement. And I'm not saying what you said was shaming at all. I just want to say we HSPs take a lot longer to do things, and we have our own process, and we are learning and taking in so much information often before we actually take action. So, everybody's where they need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we don't want people before they're ready.
Yeah.
For them or for us, we honor that journey, honoring that journey. I definitely am more of a, come on, let's do something. What do you want to be different? Let's do something. And I'm finding even as my platform has grown, it's figuring out. I had someone say, she goes, you've changed some stuff lately. And I said, because I want to be that person that helps you change your life. I don't want to be that person that creates content that you just consume. I want you to consume my content and change your life. Because I see that a lot with even just taking Brene Brown stuff or Rachel Hollis right now. She's huge. How many books of Brene's will you watch? How many videos will you watch before you take one step? It doesn't have to be a big step to change your life. That's my call. I want to meet people where they are, love them well where they are, and help them to identify what is one thing that you could do differently today to be happier and healthier. And let's stop believing the lie that it has to be this big world altering thing, because it really truly could be something as simple as you listen to a song in the morning, and that's it. We could begin there.
I love that. If by chance there are people that are not really familiar with Brene Brown's work, is there just one or two books that you would suggest starting with, or one of her TED Talks?
For sure. So she has 2 TED Talks. So the most popular one is called The Power of Vulnerability. It's literally the 4th most viewed TED Talk of all time, something like 38 million views. So I love that TED Talk. My personal favorite TED Talk of hers is called Listening to Shame. And it's actually, The Power of Vulnerability went viral. And then she was asked to close the TED conference. So not TEDx, the TED conference. And She used shame in the title, and she was criticized highly for that TED Talk, listening to shame. I love that TED Talk. I think that is her most important TED Talk. Book-wise, my favorite is Rising Strong, very quickly becoming Dare to Lead, which is the latest book. However, if someone is not familiar with Brene's work or is likes the TED Talk, but is pretty freaked out by working on shame, I always have them start with The Gifts of Imperfection. I love The Gifts of Imperfection because it's a smaller book. It's almost written kind of like a workbook, guidebook almost. Like it's the 10 guideposts of wholehearted living. At the end of every chapter, she gives you a few ideas to kind of try to change and implement in your life. But I love starting people with that book. It's like that really quick toe in the water on shame.
I love The Gifts of Imperfection. I recommend it to most of my clients, including her TED Talks, because I just think they're brilliant.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Do you like her listening to shame one?
Yes.
I know.
I hate to say it, but anything that she does, I pretty much love. And I found her on a number of podcasts that some of them are a little bit more obscure. I've found her on all kinds of YouTube videos. I mean, pretty much anything I can take in by her, I generally just love, and I quote her so much.
Mm-hmm. She is brilliant. She is exactly the person you think she is in person.
Yeah.
Really.
And I will put links to everything that we've talked about in the show notes. Okay, I want one more tidbit from you.
Okay. Anyone in particular?
No, I want to. Are you okay choosing?
The piece of my work and my life story that has saved my life so much, and I think is probably one of the most beneficial tools that I continue to teach to people. My first TED Talk is called The Permission of the And. I kind of loathe the word but. I don't hardly ever use it in any of my writing anymore because I really believe in the permission of the and. So the complicated gray is another way of putting that. And so it's this concept that I know that we have been taught that we can only feel happy or sad, that it's this black and white checkbox world, which our brain is kind of wired to be that. But what I am finding, the more I do this work, the more I practice shame resilience in my own life, that when we give ourselves permission to walk into the muck and the mess of what I call the complicated gray, that permission of the and, it is there in that space between happy and sad, the dark and the light, that we will find our magic and our clarity. And that is where our healing is. Throughout the last year, since my TED Talk was a little over a year ago, I have really discovered and realized that the permission of the and, it's not a place. Because after my TED Talk and after I started writing a lot about it, I would get so many people like, well, it's the permission of the and they're using it as this place to stay stuck versus this tool to help you move through. And my story is the best example to teach someone that I am a forever grieving mother. I have 3 children that I never got to meet. They would be 6 this year. I will always wonder who they would be. I will always remember the dates they were supposed to be here. I am a forever grieving mother. And I am the woman who chooses to do the work to see the gifts in everything. That space of the permission of the and is my tool to reclaim and rewrite my life, to honor it and to rewrite it.
And what I love about that is it creates space for both. This is just another way of saying what you're saying, that we can have grief and sorrow and we can have joy. I often quote Glennon Doyle Melton's Brutiful. It's brutal and beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
That we can have both at the same time. Like this week for me has been incredibly stressful and I've had amazing support, that we can have both in the same space. And I think that, like you said, that we tend to think that things are just, it's either good or it's bad. And when we're able to include both of those, that's when we have a full life experience. It still doesn't always mean that it's happy and joyful.
Right. Well, and that permission of the and, it means discomfort. It's fairly uncomfortable because now I'm feeling 2 emotions, you know? And so like, it is a vulnerable space and it is the space that I believe our truth lies. I really do.
It's the most honoring space because it allows us to experience everything. And I really believe that feelings are just energy. And when we allow that energy to move through us, eventually we'll get to the joy. We'll dip back down into the sadness and the struggle, but it creates room for that movement.
Yes. Yes.
But I find that people are so afraid to feel their feelings. They're so afraid that they're going to get stuck in it. They're going to get overwhelmed, that they do everything to stay out of it or to think positive or to think happy. And there's a place for that. But we also really have to allow ourselves to feel whatever it is that we're feeling.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. What do you do for play?
I love a good, funny show. I really do. One of the things that I really do just to kind of decompress and enjoy is cuddle up on the couch, make some of my favorite food, and watch a funny show. Outside of that, we love to travel. We love to experience new places and talk to strangers and eat good food. I also just really love being outside.
What are some shows that you like?
So I'm such a pain in the butt to watch TV with or watch movies with because I don't like anything dark at all anymore. Garbage in, garbage out. So my all-time favorite is New Girl. It makes me laugh out loud. And the more you watch it, the funnier it gets. I love it. I love it. I love it. I literally just the other day, I stumbled back upon Friends, which I forgot how good that show was. And the newest one is that the Amazon series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Oh my gosh. So good. It's so, I mean, like obviously such girl power and it's amazingly written. And I love the 50s, like we live in a mid-century modern house. So we love the 50s. So even all the fashion, but like it's hysterical. Like, so I used to, however, I will say this before I did this work, TV was my number one way that I offloaded hurt. Mm-hmm. Like I would numb my life with it. And so I am very cognizant of my intention when I sit on the couch to fill up with a funny show. Mm-hmm. I mean, even that doesn't mean that Chad and I never Netflix binge or anything like that. However, I really check my intention. I know like when we are binging on something, we're talking throughout, we're discussing it, we're eating good food, we're cuddling with the dogs. I am not numbing, avoiding, and escaping. So that's something for me in my journey. I have to be very cognizant. I have been able to turn that very unhealthy coping skill into something that fills me up. And I do think I will always have to be very cognizant of my intention in it because it very quickly can turn the other way.
Sure. Have you ever watched Drop Dead Diva?
Oh no. What one's that?
It's on Netflix. I love it. It's about this model who's totally into herself and her body and she gets into this car accident. And at the same time, this woman who's a very average plain Jane, literally named Jane, attorney, I think she gets shot and the spirit of the model goes into plain Jane's body.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing. And the things that they deal with, I just love it. So Drop Dead Diva.
Okay. I'm going to check it out.
I get nothing if you watch it.
I know. Wouldn't it be nice if Netflix had affiliate links?
I know. Is it easy for you to play?
It is not. I am a doer. I am a striver. And so I am learning, especially this last year, for me, play means being truly still. So like I've just started taking baths again, literally just sitting. One of my favorite things to do is to sit and have my coffee in complete silence. No phone, no music, no book, no journal. And maybe I just watch the dogs be silly and I laugh. I am finding where I am in this season of this work and of my life as I'm launching so many exciting things and taking really big risks with the businesses and things like that. That stillness is where I am finding play and curiosity. Because for me, curiosity is play. Like even if it's something as what some people might say silly, but like sitting outside and like I love doing like going out to my garden and saying like, you're my favorite plant and you're so beautiful and you're my favorite flower. Like, that's from Abraham Hicks. I want to always have this sense of awe and wonder. Always. Like I don't, whether or not it's with music or animals or nature or people's emotions and relationships and the creation of my work, I want awe and wonder in my life always. And that for me, it is feeling more and more like play. I mean, ultimately, the biggest thing I do for play, even though it's a big piece of my self-care, but it's also a really big responsibility. I raise Monarch Butterflies in the summer. That's definitely play, because when I am looking at caterpillars or letting go of butterflies, I mean, it's hard not to feel like a kid and lose track of time and just be at play.
And if y'all follow Justine on social media, she posts, if I say it wrong, please correct me, but she posts, you can see when the butterfly is coming out of the chrysalis. I mean, it's just amazing and fascinating. Yep. Did I say it right?
Yep, you did. I love it. So this past summer was our 4th season doing it. So we render, I guess. We don't really raise them, but like monarchs and swallowtails, just because when you bring them inside, you help their survival rate. And monarchs are pretty endangered at this point. They're not officially endangered, although this year is not looking good at all. And so it was one of those things that we started after our infertility journey ended. It was kind of like, as a therapist, I knew the research. People with hobbies are happier people. What do I want to do for a hobby? Let's plant a butterfly garden. And then just most miraculously, we saw a monarch butterfly lay an egg right in front of us. And I Googled it and realized people were bringing in the eggs inside to increase their chances of survival. And here we are 4 years later. And this year, I probably released about 325 healthy monarchs.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's a lot of work and it is a lot of time and it's play. I mean, we could both, it's so funny. I'll never forget the first time Chad and I watched a caterpillar go into the chrysalis, which is called pupation. But I literally got tears in my eyes and I looked at him. I was like, thank you for entertaining this very, very, very weird hobby. And he goes, oh my gosh, no, this is so weird. And it is still 4 years later. If you happen to be home and catch one going into the chrysalis or coming out, you stop everything you're doing and you watch. That's why I share so much of it on social media, because we don't have enough of that joy. We don't have enough of that awe and wonder in our lives. That's a gift, and that's play, and that's self-care, and that's how we fill up, and that's how we remember that we're all connected by something rooted in love and belonging. I don't really care what you call it, but it's all there. And so that's why I share. It's been a big saving grace in my life these last 6 years for sure.
Yeah. I struggle with play too. And what I find, especially as I'm creating new content, is I get really focused. And it's interesting. This morning I use an app called Marco Polo. A friend and I polo a lot. It's kind of, we don't have the ability to spend as much time in person, but I was saying, like, I'm feeling like I should be playing more. I should be able to do these other things, but it's what I find so engaging and stimulating when I start a new project. It's kind of like I'm in it 100%. Instead of going, isn't it wonderful that I have something that's bringing me so much joy? I go into this place of criticism where, like, there must be something wrong with me. And I have to say, it's really been an awful week. Everything's out of balance. And so my ending statement was, maybe I'll revisit this when I'm a little bit more balanced. And then if it needs to be looked at, I'll take a look at it. But today's probably not the day to be evaluating something like this.
Right. Exactly.
But do you find that too, that, when you're getting into a new project, like, it's just all consuming, but it's exciting?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, being an entrepreneur, it's so hard and so amazing. But I could probably work 16 hours a day because I love what I'm doing. I love it. I love all of it. And I'm finally learning and getting to that point of being able to, like, be honest with myself and delegate out what I'm not good at, what is not a good use of my time, so that I can do the things that I love the most, like creating the content, writing the books, creating the social media posts, videoing and things like that. But absolutely, because of who I am and that doer, striver part, especially because the striving part of me can very easily be tied to my worthiness, I have to watch it. I have to be still. I have to still do the self-care, because very quickly, if something can attach itself really quickly, that my striving, getting it done, the success of something is attached to my worthiness, which is not true at all. And yet the striving part of who I am will tell me it is.
Yeah, I'm really dancing around that as the podcast is launched, watching the numbers and looking at how people are responding. And part of it is something that it's something that I feel like I need to do to be responsible, to see how are people responding, what's working, what's not working. but I'm very aware of it's very possible that my self-esteem is wrapped up in this. And so I continually go back to like, what is my why? And I have to say that it feels really good when I know that what I'm feeling so passionate about is being well received. And so there's a really fine line there. I have a feeling I'll get a smack in the face if I cross it.
Yep. It is a really fine line. And I'm finding even with like this whole debacle that's happened with this new book, I'm finding up until probably this last year, doing some really major releasing work and leaning into the faith and things like that. When I would get those messages from someone that like your work has changed my life, blah, blah, blah. I love this. It'd be this like message of like, okay, this is why I'm going to keep going. Like I have to keep going, even though this is so hard. It was almost that quid pro quo. Like I'm only going to keep going if I get a little bit of a nudge from the audience or something like that, versus it has felt like that thread has been cut, or it's still maybe like a spiderweb thread. It's pretty fragile, but it's still there. This piece of like, okay, that's not why I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going because this work is changing lives, but most importantly, because I can't not do it because it's who I am and it's what I love and it's my gifts that serve the world. And so those messages now have become, versus this message of you have to keep going, this is why you do it. It's a message of thank you for that glimpse that this is bigger than me.
Interesting.
It's a slight shift, but it feels so different.
Things can often look the same from the outside as the inside. Like I often say, on the outside, somebody can be having a salad for lunch, and it could be because it only has 400 calories and there's no fat in it, and that's how they control and manage their weight. Or it could be because I love and nurture myself and that this is how I create a healthy, strong body. And from the outside, nobody really knows what the internal motivation is.
Yes. A lot of people don't realize how powerful that internal motivation is, because it literally can change how that salad's digested.
What would you want to tell your younger self?
You're not too much. You are just right. Like you are not too much. You're not too dramatic. Like that. It is that part of who you are that will help so many people. And when you just walk into it and embrace her and love her, you'll help more people and love yourself more. It's that too much message that I got, and I still get it. I am not too much.
That's my core wound. And when I was poloing today, it came up and I said, can you please give me some feedback, because I'm really feeling like I'm too much and I'm just in a depleted space. So I'm right there with you.
Yep.
It is a hard one. So we've talked about some of your projects. Do you want to tell the listeners about any other places that they can find you or things that you're working on that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. So I'm so easy to find on social media, Justine Froelker. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. My public Facebook page, I share a self-care tip of the day every day. I have a couple online self-care programs that are really affordable places to start pouring into yourself if you want a little bit of accountability and direction. I am going to be launching my first online Brene curriculum. So I do retreats and workshops and things like this, but this will be the first time that I'm going to be delivering the full curriculum online. And so it's a 4-month program and community that we're going to meet weekly and go through the curriculum together via Zoom. You'll have access to her videos and the trademark curriculum that you only get when you work with a certified facilitator. And then finally, my books. There is nothing quite more powerful than purchasing, reading, sharing, and reviewing them. Reviews are kind of like food and water to a small-time author.
Yeah.
That I'm trying to only check that number versus the ranks, like check like, oh, awesome, I got another review. Versus not reading the reviews either. But that's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Justine, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and just all the wisdom that you shared with me and the listeners.
Thank you so much. I loved it. I knew I would, and I just really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. If you want to get any information about the show, the easiest thing to do is to go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. You can find the episode you're interested in and click on it, and the show notes will be there. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is there as well. We have a Facebook community by the same name, Unapologetically Sensitive. I would love to have you join. It's a place where I'm hoping that we can connect. I can get to know you and get a sense of what content you're looking for, how I can help you and be of service. Please remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.